everyone out there in YouTube land? Dan here, aka the Comic Concierge. And when it comes to comics, one of the hardest questions to answer is a very basic one. Where do I begin? With so many series, so many years of continuity, having a starting point can be difficult to find. That's where this series comes in. Each week I look at all the new books coming out, pick out the ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new number ones, and trade paperbacks and graphic novels being released. So let's start things off by looking at the series that will be debuting this week. One of the big new series coming out this week is Silk #1, and surprisingly, this is actually not even tied to King of Black. It seems like a lot of the new number ones have been tied to that, especially Spider-Man related, but no, this is brand new, its own thing, and it has a creative team that has me intrigued. Margaret Go is not necessarily a creator that maybe a lot of regular superhero fans might be aware of, but she actually has a pretty accomplished career writing prose novels, writing a lot of YA books, and I think she could bring an audience to a character like Silk that wasn't there before. I'm also excited because the artist behind this was the same artist that drew the Matt Cadet U book for Boom Studios a few years ago, and I love that series. It was this kind of take on the Voltron type of situation where you had giant robots fighting other monsters. It was a really fun time. The art was slick and had a manga-esque like style, which could work well for a book like this. Again, probably going to maybe be geared towards an audience that is not necessarily your typical Marvel audience, and that's a great thing. You need to, expand the different type of people that read these stories, and maybe classic Silk fans will be happy to see her return because it's been a while since we've had a Silk book. This is a character that came out of the Dan Slott run, has very much the similar makeup to that of Spider-Man, but a very different and darker past. I'm excited to see what this is. There's a lot of potential here, and I'm happy to see Marvel trying to expand their line to comics like this. Alright, another new number one coming from Marvel this week is Avengers Cult of Man-Thing #1, and this year marks the 50th anniversary of Man-Thing. It's a big year for anniversaries, and it seems like they're going all in with a book like this. This also marks Steve Orlando's debut with Marvel. He's done a lot for DC. He's done some indie stuff, but now he is in the Marvel world, and they're letting him work on Man-Thing. And Man-Thing is kind of your Swamp Thing-esque like character, although technically came before Swamp Thing. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. But we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, this is a vast improvement over like the last major Man-Thing series, which was done by R.L. Stine, which was all types of awful. It was this meta take on the character. It broke the fourth wall. He became a actor. It was really weird. Don't read it. It's not good. So it doesn't have a lot to live up to. There really hasn't been a great inspiring Man-Thing comic in I don't know how long. So I think there's a lot of room to do something cool with a character, because that's sometimes a great opportunity to do something original and new, is taking characters that just haven't clicked and making something new out of them. Looking at like Guardians of the Galaxy from the early 2000s, a lot of those characters were nothing and became, now they're huge stars after the movie. Now maybe that can happen with Man-Thing. We'll see. Another new number one from Image Comics this week is Shadecraft #1, and this is done by the creators who did Skyward a few years ago that actually just got a hardcover last week, and that told the story of what would happen to Earth if gravity stopped working. It was a really great series, very inventive, and it was just a series that was always like a joy to read. And now they're doing a new book, Shadecraft, and the premise of this is that there's this girl who lives in a small town and apparently is very scared all the time. She's afraid of her own shadow. But then shadows seem to be potentially coming to life, so maybe there's a reason behind that. And knowing how creative they got with Skyward, I assume we get something very similar with this book. So that's why I'm also wanting to check it out. So if you enjoyed that book and you wanted to see what this team had in store, maybe want to check out Shadecraft. That'll be in stores this week. Anytime we get a kids series, I like to point it out because when it comes to floppy issues, it's kind of rare. But Marvel Action Spider-Man #1 debuts this week, and IDW has been doing a lot of these for Marvel, taking a lot of their characters in these action type series that are dedicated to kids. But I do want to say, although they are YA or kid appropriate, they're often very good. Just because it's dedicated to kids, I don't necessarily mean as an adult you won't enjoy it. The art's often very fun. The art often telling stories maybe that you're somewhat familiar with, but a different take on them. So what's also nice about them is that they're not bogged down with all the different continuity, everything that's coming on. And if you just want like a classic look at these characters, they're a joy to read. So just don't dismiss it because it's done by IDW or it's more kid friendly. And it reminds me of like reading these books when I was younger in a lot of ways. So give it a shot if you're looking for something Spider-Man related, and maybe the Spider-Man title is not kind of checking your fancy as a light. You have a book like this that might actually scratch that itch a lot harder than the current Spider-Man run. Also coming out this week is Biden's Titans #1. Yes, this is a comic that actually exists, and this comes from Keen Spot Comics that does a lot of these types of books from all different types of political figures. They did a Trump book, they did a Yang Yang book. It seems like that's kind of their niche of taking political figures, putting them in a surreal type of comic book scenario and getting a comic out of it. I've never read any of them, so I can't speak to their quality. They've never personally interested me because it just seemed like something that was a bit, I don't know, not something I was interested in, just something that seemed to want to grab a headline that the most interesting thing about it was potentially just the title or the idea. And again, that's speaking out of ignorance because I've never read it. Maybe I'll give this one a shot just so I can speak from a more educated position on this type of book rather than just assuming what it's like. Maybe it ends up being really good. If you're a person that has read these and has an opinion on them, I like to hear them. I've not really seen anyone ever talk about them outside the fact that they are things that exist and people collect them. So I'd be interested to hear if they actually are any good and worth reading, if they're funny, if they have a fun satirical take, if they have anything to say, or if it's just exploitation for exploitation's sake. We shall see. The next new #1 we're going to talk about is the Cult of Dracula #1 from Source Point Press. And I really am interested in this mainly because of the concept of it. Yes, there are a lot of Dracula stories out there, but just by the concept, it does seem like it has a bit of a different take on it, where there's this massive suicide at this shady looking location, which is owned by someone just happens to have the last name Dracula. And what you have is a documentary film crew investigating the situation to see what happened. And I just like that idea of seeing a comic, seeing a story like this told through that perspective. And I do wonder, like, how are they going to do it? Are they going to make it seem like you're watching the documentary as you are reading the comic? Are these just the characters? There's a lot of potential there, and I do feel like Source Point Press is again one of those publishers that is kind of gaining ground over the last few years. It's not maybe to the level of Image or anything like that, but they're putting out better and better books, and this can certainly go there. And I don't like that. Horror books are something I can take or leave depending upon how good they are, and I think ultimately what it starts with is having a foundation or something that is going to be different than just your traditional type of trope kind of genre story. And looking just at the concept of this, I feel like it could fall into that category. The last #1 we're going to talk about this week is Black Beacon #1 from Heavy Metal Comics. And this is written by Brian K. Lindsay, who's a creator that I have enjoyed in the past. His series for Dark Horse Negative Space I thought was really a weird and wild trip of a book. And this seems like it could be something similar. The idea behind this book is that there's the space station, this enormous, large space station that's the size of a galaxy, apparently, that seems like a utopia at first. It makes people want to come there because it seems like the best place in existence. Unfortunately, that may be a lie, and when they get there, they find it's not necessarily the utopia that they were told it was, and horrible things tend to happen. So, being a heavy metal book, Heavy Metal's had, is doing more and more series like this. Tarnia, for example, is one that I've really liked. I don't know how this would fall. Usually their books are high energy, a lot of action. Maybe that's the case. This does seem like high concept science fiction, which I do love. That's really my game a lot, especially things that take place in space like this. So I'll give it a shot and see how it goes. And hopefully it's another good new series from Heavy Metal Comics. All right, now that we've talked about the new series debuting, let's move over to ongoing series starting new arcs, starting with the history of the DC Universe #3. And each installment of this is going to take in the history of the DC Universe and told through different perspectives. The first one was more of Black Lightning. The second was some of the Teen Titans characters. And this one is Katana's history, which I think is something that's going to be very different than the other ones that were very much within the history of the United States. This, again, taking place in another country. Katana is a character that I don't know a lot about, so this to me seems like the perfect opportunity to learn more. It's written by John Ridley, who is coming from, doing things on like 12 Years a Slave. He also is writing the new next Batman books, and been doing this with art by Giuseppe Camuncoli, who is has a more realistic style which fits this book, and it's a more of a comic prose type approach where you have one page of art and the other page of text, which I think fits probably Ridley's style a little bit more, being more of a screenwriter than a comic book writer. I've liked the next Batman stuff well enough, but this to me is where he shines. These have been the best comics he's written. I really like the last one. The first one so far that centered on Black Lightning was probably the best. This, again, I think is going to have potential to be just as good, knowing it's going to go into an entirely different type of history for the DC universe. If you're a person who loves to learn things about continuity but through a different perspective, this is your book, and it's again through Black Label, so I don't know how much of this technically has happened or it's just an idea that's being presented. So if you want to check it out, something very different than anything else that DC's currently putting out on the shelves. The next ongoing series starting a new arc is Black Cat number 4. The last few issues of Black Cat have all been about King in Black, and that's been an interesting look at the character in a situation where you wouldn't necessarily think a street level character like her would fit, but they ended up being some of the better stories tied into that of the King in Black series. Now though, that's over and we get Black Cat just being Black Cat. In this story, there's a new cat in town, a new cat that calls herself Queen Cat, and seems like there'll be some tension with her and Black Cat. I guess a lot of cat fighting in this instance. I guess that's appropriate since they're both cats. I don't know. A lot of cats. Who doesn't love cats? Cats are all over the place. But I do wonder now that King in Black is over and this can kind of get over the reins of that and just be a Black Cat story. Will we see what this series will look like for the long haul? The last Black Cat series was a lot of fun. It existed within the crimes type of tropes, and this does seem like it could have potential there. Who is this new Queen Cat character? She's connected to Norman Osborn in some way, so it probably is not good. So I don't know. If you were a person maybe that dismissed this book because you didn't want to read King in Black, but you are a big fan of the character, this may be a good point to jump on, since now it's a fresh new story that is starting anew, that is not tied to anything else except for what's in the pages this week. The last ongoing series starting a new arc is Shadow Service number 6, which comes back after a number of months off. And what's been the best part of this series is that it has been this combination of a magic story and a PI investigation story, and it's worked really well, partly because of how well it can kind of explain the rules of its world. Magic is a very tricky thing to write well, because magic, you can just have things that you can create whatever you want, and it's hard to get a firm grasp of like how the world operates. This has done a really good job of letting you know like how things work by seeing it through action, by not necessarily just blatantly telling you everything that does happen here and there, but just through the way the characters interact. And there's a situation, for example, where a character was captured and she's able to escape using a certain special power, and it just was a good example of showing like the limitations of power, but also how you can overcome them. It has a lot of little bits like that too that just help inform you, so you have an idea of like why what's happening is happening. So there's stakes there. It's just not like people saying magic words at one another while you just try to figure out what happened. Now, this is not a series I would advise probably jumping in at this point. You maybe want to read the first trade and then get into it. Typically, indie series aren't always the most welcoming when you're halfway through. It can be fun if you're a type of person that just likes to try to figure things out as they go, or if you like to read something that's like a meshing of different genres, this book will probably work for you. But if you do enjoy that first arc, if you're able to get the first trade and want to jump on and get in present day, you'll be able to do that. My guess is you'll probably get another 5 issues or so. I don't know what the goal is for this. Vol comics often don't go on that long, so probably another 5 issues or so. Maybe this will be the longer ongoing, I don't know. But Vol Comics, they're probably one of my favorite current publishers out there. They have really strong consistency in things they put out. I don't love everything they do, but I think ultimately, even if I don't like it, you can tell that they put a lot of craft and thought behind the books that they publish. Alrighty, now that we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, let's take a shift over to trade paperbacks and graphic novels being released, starting with the 80th anniversary of Green Arrow. And this is a big year for anniversaries, like I mentioned. Man-Think's 50th anniversary, Captain America's 80th anniversary, and Green Arrow's 80th anniversary. Now, this is not one of those collections we've seen in the past, like with Joker and Batman and Detective, where you have a collection of short stories that are brand new, that celebrate the character. This is a re-release of classic Green Arrow stories, everything from his first appearance to Green Arrow Rebirth, #1 from a few years ago. Also includes classic issues like the issue of Speedball when he gets hooked on drugs and Green Arrow has to deal with it. So looking at some of the most important issues in the history of Green Arrow and putting them in one collection, and this is going to run about $29.99 for cover price. So if you are a big Green Arrow fan, I know we have not had a Green Arrow series for some years now, and you want to read some of these classic issues, you have it all in this one nice package. I don't know if we'll get one of those celebration issues like we've had in the past, which is new material. My guess would be yes. We shall see. If they're going to do one for Robin, they have to do one for Green Arrow. I don't know. But if you want to read some classic Green Arrow stories and you've never read the character, this does seem like a great opportunity to pick this up because it's going to really give you the lowdown of his history in one complete package. The next trade paperback we're going to talk about is the Volume 2 of John Constantine Hellblazer. And when I do these videos, I usually don't include Volume 2s because the whole idea is starting points, but I had to call this out because this was my favorite series from last year. So I saw the collection was coming out and thought, you know what, let me include it in this video just so I could talk about how great it is yet again. And this is the best take we've gotten on John Constantine in I don't know how long, probably since like the New 52, really, that since he was kind of brought into like the regular continuity. This exists outside of that. It's as close as we got into the Vertigo run since the Vertigo run, and you can tell this is the better place for the character. Simon Spurrier is the writer behind it, and this is also very deep into social commentary at the time. You can tell he's kind of looking at the tea leaves of current British politics, and a lot of that is certainly heavily referenced within this, but it's just ultimately it's John Constantine being John Constantine. Fantastic storytelling and great art as well with each and every issue. There are a few artists within it, but ultimately it always remains kind of within the same type of style. So I love this book. I can't say enough of great things about it. If you're a Hellblazer fan, even if you're not a Hellblazer fan, I think it's worth reading. I would say get the first trade first and then get into the second trade, but that was, one of the better Black Label series that we've gotten, and I hope that we get more Hellblazer. Unfortunately, it ended at 12 issues, and I thought there was so much more story to tell. Unfortunately, this is it for now. So maybe if more people buy the trade, we can get it to come back, because that would be fantastic. A collection from Marvel this week is Shang-Chi, done by Janie Lung Yang, that just finished up actually not that long ago, and I'm guessing they're trying to get this out maybe before the movie that's coming out, if it ever comes out. But this actually was a pretty enjoyable series. It wasn't anything that was phenomenal, but we haven't had a lot of Shang-Chi type of stuff, and this, I thought, did a good job of bringing the character back into the fold while starting something new. It got into some of those relationships with his sister and had pretty solid kung fu action. It's not going to set the world on fire or anything like that. It's not the best thing Gene Yuling has done, but I thought it's just a good entry point into the character. If you're wanting to know more about him before the movie does come out, it's a good series to read and pick up. And I think we're getting a continuation of this series later in the month. We're going to get a lot of these. There was also a one-shot that happened right after this ended, which I don't believe is included in this run. But if you're a fan of the character and you want to read it and you missed out on the monthly issues, now the trade is out there for you. All right, we talked about trades. Now let's look over to the world of graphic novels with You Died, an Afterlife anthology. And this is an anthology of the Afterlife cult. You get that by the title, You Died, which is a pretty bold title. You got to give it credit for that. And this gets a series of cartoonists and comic book creators and has them write and do stories about death. And it is one of those taboo subjects that we often don't talk about in any significant manner. So seeing a comic book that is dedicated to just that, I'm a sucker for good anthology series, especially when you have a connecting theme like this. There's something about being able to tell an effective story in only a short amount of time that I find fascinating. So I know anthologies don't necessarily work for everyone because I don't know, maybe they don't like the idea of switching from one idea to the next that quickly. I'm not sure, but at least with this, it's a connected theme, so you may see some continuity from story to story. All right, the next comic book we're going to talk about is North Star from Adhurst Books. And if you're a fan of the cartoons like Adventure Time or Steven Universe and you've enjoyed those, well, you might actually enjoy this comic as well because it comes from the same creators. And I personally have never watched those cartoons. They just came out at a time when I wasn't necessarily watching cartoons of that ilk, so I can't necessarily speak to those or this book. It does promise basically to be a very weird and different type of style and experience as a reader. I'm all for that. There's not much more narratively that I can see that it's discussing. That, to me, sometimes it makes me more intrigued when I'm not giving a lot of information, just told, hold on to your hats and see how things go. But if you do enjoy those cartoons, you do enjoy that type of style, and you're missing it because you have not, haven't gotten any new episodes or whatever, and you want to see it revisited in a different way, this may be a comic book that you'll enjoy. Also coming out this week from First Second is Shadow Life. And First Second is one of my favorite publishers. I tend to really love everything they put out. And this book is about an older woman who's put into an assisted living home by her daughter because she thinks it's best for her, but she can't stand it. She doesn't feel like it's the right place, so she moves into an apartment by herself and lives her life. But shortly after that, death comes knocking, and literally in this case, but she tries to evade that script utilizing some of her friends, both old and new. So based upon that premise, it does seem to focus on two things, the idea of dealing with our family members that are in their golden years and what it's like to be there, and the idea of mortality and death. Again, this is a big week for death, I guess. I don't know what's in the air. Maybe it's just the way we find ourselves in the world. And First Second, like I said, is a very consistent publisher. Maybe one complaint is that their art styles do tend to fit a very certain similar mode to this. This is from a creator I don't used to have a lot of experience with, but when it comes to First Second, that's often the case. Usually it's me finding an art creator for the first time, loving their stuff, and going back and trying something new. I do like this idea, a comic focused on the later years of someone's life. Rarely do we get stories that are centered on that, because people aren't experiencing those days, so they're not writing towards them. So it's good to see that. It makes me think of the Paco Roca book Wrinkles that came out a number of years ago. You also had the movie based upon it as well. If it can hit that level of sweetness and bittersweetness, it'll be a great series. So we'll wait and see. But again, Shadow Life will be coming to stores this week. You can also get it at bookstores as well. The next graphic novel we're going to talk about is Sea of Dreams, and this premise is bonkers in the best way, where you have an alien creature that sees an ice festival and is in love with it. It is in love with the beauty that he sees created using ice. So how does he respond, or how does the alien respond? By creating their own type of ice sculpture. Unfortunately, when they do that, they use all of the ocean's water, causing massive devastation across the planet. And what you have is the world trying to fight back against these aspects of beauty and glorious art that are ultimately destroying the world. So, one of those things where, you don't know the true impact of your actions. And again, that's just, to me, we've seen so many alien invasion stories and things like that, but rarely do we have an invasion story where something horrible happens by mistake or something. So this is also the start of what should be a massive graphic novel run for these comic creators. It seems like they have a book deal of potentially 16 graphic novels. I don't know if this will be one of all the stories, or we'll have different stories in one. We shall see. This doesn't look like it'll be at maybe comic book stores as of right now, but you should be able to pick it up at bookstores starting this Wednesday. All right, it's finally time to get to what we've talked about. New number one. We talked about books starting new arcs. We talked about graphic novels and trade paperbacks. Now it's time to talk about the book I'm most excited about, my pick of the week. And yes, you could probably guess this is my pick of the week because it is the cover image and we haven't brought it up yet, but I couldn't resist. It had to be Better April number one. Now, two major reasons. One, I'm loving the current Thor run, and this is kind of coming out of the pages of that and being done by Donny Cates and Nick Klein. Beta Ray Bill's going through this new transformation. He lost his Thor powers, so what's the world going to be like? But the biggest reason I'm excited for this is Daniel Warren Johnson, one of my favorite current writers/artists that is out in business right now. Loved Murder Falcon. I loved Extremity. I loved Wonder Woman Dead Earth. Now he gets to do Beta Ray Bill. If there's one concern for me, it's the fact that this is taking place in the normal Marvel universe. And one thing with Daniel Warren Johnson is that he does a great job of depicting like violence and extreme kind of action sequences. And I don't know if he'll be able to be let loose in just a normal Marvel title. We shall see. But again, Beta Ray Bill is a character I do really love. Coming out of the Simonson Thor run, and now he's being used again. He's one of those characters I feel like is gone for years, and then you get creators who really miss him and enjoy him. Now he comes back in a big way, and maybe this will be that with this series. And it's a perfect partnership to me. If you're going to ask like who would be a great creator to do a book like this, Daniel Warren Johnson would be one of the first ones I would mention. One of the best things he does is to kind of encapsulate scale. And when you have a character that does a lot of space battles, fights a lot of monsters, who better than him? So super excited about this book. Hopefully it kind of lives up to the hype. I don't know if it's going to at all require you to come in with the knowledge from the Donny Cates run. Just ultimately know with that, Beta Ray Bill kind of got defeated by Thor. He doesn't have those Thor-like powers. Stormbreaker no longer exists. So my guess is them trying to find a way for him to rekindle that type of power again, or what his new status quo. He's still a warrior. Don't forget he did defeat Thor in his first appearance, even without his special powers. So he's someone you don't want to trifle with, even without his godlike ability. But excited to see this. I don't know if we've ever gotten, or the last time we've gotten, a Beta Ray Bill solo series, but hey, I'm all for it. So, all right, well, that's it for this week's video. Just remember, comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.